Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. What is going on, everybody? Happy draft week. It's finally here. Countdown is on. We will have a mock draft. I think I'll put it out on Wednesday. And then obviously we'll have wall-to-wall opinions, takes, coverage, I guess. Is that not a reporter, but we'll be talking about all the picks, things we like, things we don't like. Thursday, Friday, Coward. We will have a lot of content, a lot of videos flying left and right. But today, Field Yates, who worked at ESPN now for a long time, is going to be on the ABC broadcast Thursday, Friday, and I think Saturday they're on ESPN. He actually got his start. He's buddies, and we'll talk about it, buddies with Belichick, started working for the Patriots when he was a high school football player, worked with Scott Pioli in Kansas City before he got into the world he's in now. But I've known him for a long time. I like him a lot. His career trajectory is like a rocket ship. The dude's crushing it. Good-looking dude. Great head of hair. So we will talk to Field Yates a little about his background and definitely about some of his thoughts on the draft and specifically the quarterbacks and how he think, kind of this whole thing's going to shake out. Yeah, man, it was a fun conversation. So it's coming up next. But first, I got to tell you about my close friends, Game Time. Here's what I need you to do. Download the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app. They're the official ticketing app of this podcast. NBA games all weekend. NHL playoffs at the gym today. See a bunch of dudes in towels locked into an NHL playoff game. They're fantastic. I'm not even a big NHL guy, but you throw in the playoffs, I'm glued. You want to go to one of these events, concerts. I checked out the new Taylor Swift album. Not going to lie. Pretty good. If you want to get out, go to a concert. I saw Coachella was last weekend. I got you covered. Just download that app. Promo code JOHN, 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 $20 off your first pair of tickets. $20 off your first. In these inflationary times, save a little money, go to an event, have some fun, do it on us. Promo code JOHN, JOHN. Do it now. Download the Game Time app. Very, very excited. A guy I've known for a long time, and I don't know if you've noticed, he feels like a rocket ship over there at the mothership. And you can find him this week, kind of a big week, and he just happens to be on ABC. Who is he, Howard Cosell? No, he's Field Yates.
I wish I were Howard Cosell. That would be pretty sweet, right? Just slightly more famous and had like a slightly bigger role in ABC's coverage of a lot of things relative to mine on the draft, but can't wait for it. Can't wait.
How many players have you watched for this draft?
Probably close to 400. I think I wrote up, graded 331 or 2. So probably 400 or so in terms of total exposure. That process of whittling down that back end of the 400 was fairly straightforward. I mean, as you know, once you get past a certain number, and I'd argue that number is actually a lot smaller than the public probably realizes. So much of it is beauty in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, I think most boards are going to have, similar top 20 or 25 players. Once you get to like player 50, it's so subjective. So much of it is about, team fit, system. Some of it's about how one area scout has evaluated the character of a prospect versus how a different area scouts evaluated the character of a prospect, and, medicals, things like that all influence those things. But I think people get really fired up when it's day 4 and they hear that their team just drafted a 4th round prospect in round 6, and they think that they've won the draft, when the reality is that our job as a draft analyst is to scout for all 32 teams, when each of the 32 teams has such a different process and they have such different criteria they're using to grade these players that it's not quite as relevant and important within buildings as it is probably here in the public. But that's a huge part of my job, so you got to embrace it.
Before, I think a lot of people, obviously, if they follow the NFL, which as we know, a lot of people follow the NFL, know who you are, but I'm not sure they know your background. Can you tell a little bit about how you got started kind of in high school? And I'm pretty sure your college football lacrosse career, same school as a guy named William Belichick as well?
Yeah, again, slightly less famous than Howard Cosell on ABC, slightly less famous and accomplished than Bill Belichick at Wesleyan. But yeah, back in my late high school into my college days, I spent God knows how long. I think it was 4 summers. And then I tell people every disposable hour I had when I wasn't at school or at practice was down at the Patriots facility, kind of working as a grunt, sort of learning the football ins and outs. I called that my football Rosetta Stone, where I was learning, I guess, how the Patriots went about their business. But as you can imagine, given all the success they were having at that time and continue to have for 15 more years, that a lot of the league was emulating how they were going about their business. So the way that I was learning things, I think, is still pretty prevalent around the NFL. When I first got into that New England building, just as a quick aside, the number of heavy hitters that were in that building, which we didn't realize at the time, pretty astounding, right? Like Adam Peters was a scouting assistant, Brian Flores was a scouting assistant. You had guys like Jason Light on the scouting staff, Thomas Dimitroff, John Robinson, Scott Pioli. So that right there is what, 4 future NFL GMs. Monty Austinford on that staff as well, make it 5 right there. So Bob Quinn, that's 6. You just go through that roster of people that were there. A lot of the coaches obviously are well known because, coaches have probably a little bit more notoriety than GMs, except for probably during this part of the draft cycle. But yeah, the Patriots days led into some time with Kansas City when Scott Pioli got hired out there. He had an opening on the scouting staff. So I got my teeth kind of cut there a little bit more. I got paid, not much, as you know, but I got paid a little bit to do some of that scouting work. And then I would love to tell you that I had like this perfect epiphany of what was going to be next. I wasn't totally sure what was going to be next, but I had an idea it might be the world of sports media. So it's been a different journey to get from where I started to where I am right now at ESPN, but certainly one that I think the scouting background has played a pretty darn influential role in.
Did you go to high school with Stephen Belichick?
No, we didn't go to high school together, but we played against each other on the football and lacrosse fields. So fierce competitors.
Would you consider him a good buddy?
Yeah, he is a good buddy. He's the best. He's going to do awesome out there at Washington. I'm fired up for it's a big transition, obviously, to go from
For sure.
the Patriots to the college football, especially with how the landscape has changed. But I'm proud of him for taking that leap of faith. And I had a chance to go out there for Washington Pro Day, which was not tied to Steve, but just had a chance to be out there for some ESPN assignments. And it's amazing how different the college game is now compared to like half a decade ago. It's also amazing what kind of facilities and access and resources these big time college programs have right now. It is absurd, man. It is. They might have better facilities across the board.
How beautiful? How
level.
beautiful is that stadium? The water.
It's ridiculous. You kidding me?
Cool.
Like I'd have a hard time concentrating if I were Jed Fish trying to call offensive plays on the sidelines, or Steve trying to call defensive plays on the sideline with that backdrop there. I don't know how often it's sunny in Seattle. It certainly wasn't sunny for much of my time out there, which is only about 36 hours. But I did Oregon and Washington about 2 weeks apart. And those two places, man, like I was at Oregon for the pro day for Bo Nix. And I was in there, I was walking through the indoor facility, and I told somebody there, I said, this might be the nicest indoor facility that I've ever seen. And the response was, really? Yeah. They go, oh, that's interesting because we're moving into the new one right next door about 6 months from right now. This is about to become the indoor facility for like the other sports besides football, right? Obviously, as we know, football is king in all these major college programs. So if you think there's serious cash going around in the NFL, just go step foot on one of these top, 10, 15, 20 programs in college football. You get a real sense of where that money is.
You know what my theory is on those bad report cards? Listen, some of them might be kind of crappy, but I wonder if it's a little overinflated. These guys are all coming from Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon. Of course. And now it's like, listen, I pay you with that paycheck that's 10, 20, $30 million. Sorry, your chair is not personally up to your liking. I think that these guys are a little convoluted. Not saying that some of them don't need to improve, but I do wonder if some of these guys have a false sense of like, okay, I'm from college. Now I'm going to the pros like the Taj Mahal. It's like, no, actually, that's not the way it is with facility.
Right, so, yeah, that's an interesting point. And it kind of ties to something that may have come up during this conversation or may not. But I've been thinking about this a lot over the past 24, 48 hours is, Jayden Daniels, who we think could go, maybe will go number 2 overall to the Commanders, took this visit to go to DC, and his agent seemed to take issue with the fact he tweeted about, he used the emoji on top of a clip of Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk and Chris Sims during their show PFT Live, ripping the Commanders for having all the quarterbacks in at the same time, which didn't really bother me. I had no reaction to it, right? Because during my
They brought
scouting
everybody.
days,
They
like,
brought 20
yeah,
guys in.
yeah, we had tons of days where there was 5 prospects at once, and sometimes it was, 2 guys at the same position. And when I was in Kansas City one year, we were picking 5th overall. So if we had, there was a year, I think that was the year that Russell Okung and Trent Williams both came out, and those guys both ended up being, I think, top 6 picks. Like, I don't think if we had those guys in the building at the same time, it was some affront to society, right? It was just that's what you did. It was an easy way to knock out 2 pre-draft visits in one day. Maybe some of these guys had busier schedules than other, but I think it's a reminder of where these athletes are right now, right? And part of this is the influence of NIL, where like these athletes are made to feel like royalty now, and you probably are treated differently as the starting quarterback. I mean, the Heisman Trophy winner for sure. Then even though college quarterbacks have probably always had it pretty good, I'm sure the lifestyle for these quarterbacks or these high-level athletes is different now compared to where it was. I think the player empowerment era is kind of upon us, where they probably feel like they have more levers to pull, right? If you're bothered by something that a college is doing, there's the leverage of like 5 different transfer windows where you can say, I'm out, right? I mean, we're seeing it left and right in
See right
college
now with
football
Dion.
right now.
Dion's
Dion,
pissed
I
off.
mean, what was it, 12 guys he lost this past week or something like that? But we're seeing, Duke basketball has lost 7 players to the transfer portal. That season's been over for what, 3 weeks now? So I do think there's a little bit of an interesting sort of adjustment the NFL teams are probably catching on to now, which is that some of the way that you have to kind of treat these players is evolving compared to where things were. And I'm not talking about 20 years ago or even a decade ago, even just like a few years ago. I think we're in a much different time.
The 82 game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, John, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. You're a Boston guy. You live in Boston full time, right?
Now we've since moved down to Connecticut just to be closer to ESPN, but we were in Boston for a long time until recently.
Yeah, I consider you a Boston guy. Obviously, the Kraft Belichick divorce felt less ugly at the time, even though it felt a little forced when they had the press conference. It's gotten a little out of control, clearly, I would say, since. Yeah. Here's another theory I'm going to run by you. Elliot Wolf said yesterday or 2 days ago, right, we're open for business. No different than Monty, no different than the Chargers. What if the Crafts, the easiest way to keep the conversation going negatively about you? Trade back, draft offensive linemen, wide receivers. Do you know the way to get people talking about something else? Draft a quarterback.
Yeah.
Not saying that you wouldn't take a quarterback anyway, but I wonder if it's like, let's just take quarterback, guys. And it just gets all the conversation on Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy immediately and off Bob a little bit. Because he's getting crushed, correct?
Yeah,
I mean, people aren't happy.
It has not been good. But here's what I would say. The only reason why I would disagree with the theory about like moving on from the topic is that I think he had multiple opportunities, did Robert Kraft, to shift the narrative or move away from the topic. But while he, I think, has made it clear, and the director of that Patriots dynasty piece has made it clear that ultimately it was in the director's hands to influence how that piece actually unfolded and what content they had on there. I mean, anybody who watched it certainly felt like there was, or at least many people that have watched it, including many former Patriots players and staffers, felt as though it was an inaccurate depiction of Bill Belichick's influence. And Bill, while he was in it briefly, I mean, certainly had very little in the way of interest in being a big part of that, right? I mean, he had very few words, it seemed like, there. So there are people in Boston, in the New England region, that feel like, that documentary spent more effort trying to denigrate Bill Belichick than it did highlight the greatest dynasty in the history of the sport that might, I say might because, the Chiefs have won 3 out of the last 4, but that might never be replicated over a 2-decade span. So, and then between that and then, subsequent things that have taken place, it feels like Robert Kraft's had a chance to kind of calm things, and yet it doesn't feel like he's been as aggressive in calming things as I think he probably could be to allow people to turn the page. And Bill Belichick, I feel like, and I think Patriots fans that I had like a reasonable head on their shoulders respected Bill and were, deeply conflicted when the Patriots decided to move on. I think they acknowledged, because Bill said it might have been time, that they were sort of respectful of that part of it. But now it's like Bill is just as popular now as he has maybe was after like a Super Bowl win. Like everybody's like, what are we doing? Talking about a guy who took us to 9 Super Bowls in anything other than the light of this is the greatest to ever do it. Why should the narrative be anything other than that? The reality is it shouldn't be, and it has become that. And I do think there might be an opportunity for Robert Kraft to maybe like put out the flames a little bit, because it is getting a bit out of control right now.
You know, you know him and the family. I don't know him, and I'm offended for him. Like, I think it's ridiculous. The
No, it's
way the stuff.
ridiculous.
It's like, give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
And listen, the Atlanta stuff. Obviously, Raheem Morris was a really good coaching candidate. So if you want to hire him, that's not that crazy. But some of these comments, like Carolina, not that interested. Like, give me a break.
I know.
Not
I
that
know.
Bill would have been interested in them, but do you imagine that because it's weird, right? He's going to be 74 next coaching cycle. A lot of moving parts in the league. Things change really fast. Do you think today, and I guess we'll see him next week with Pat again,
Yeah.
like, do you think he's pretty pissed off, like the way everything's going, or is he just kind of in that mindset he's so good at like compartmentalize, moving on? Because that's how he's been as a coach.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter, where he's kind of at peace with what took place. And I think ready to take on this challenge of being a draft analyst next Thursday night. And by the way, that's going to be must see, right?
Well,
I mean, the guy's
how
going to
good
be,
was he with Pat the other day?
it's
He's just good.
unbelievable. Yeah, the two of them just obviously have a very natural chemistry, and Bill is going to be excellent on that draft broadcast next week, because he ain't going there without pretty darn good knowledge on these players, right? Like, I don't think Bill's going to show up and J.C. Latham from Alabama is going to come off the board. He's going to say, "Yeah, don't know a whole lot about that guy," right? Like, you can imagine Bill's done some pretty serious tape study on many of these prospects, so that'll be cool to see on Thursday nights. And can we find a way to keep it going like through the entirety of the draft? I'm sure Bill has some knowledge about some guys that might end up going in round 7. But I do wonder if a couple of things is that there might be some people around the NFL after Thursday night, if they catch some of Bill's commentary, or maybe Friday once they're having a chance to catch up on it, that are saying to themselves, really? Like, a league which saw 8 coaching changes this offseason allowed this guy to remain a free agent? You better believe that there are some coaches who are feeling a little bit of pressure innately already, that after Thursday night's broadcast are going to be saying to themselves, I better start hot next year, because Bill is effectively the 33rd NFL coach now, right? I'm not saying he would take every job. I have no knowledge that he would take any specific job, but don't you think there's owners out there, they're going to say to themselves, if our team starts 1-5 and Bill Belichick is available to come on and take over on an interim basis, which, by the way, the
Rivers
NFL,
style.
exactly. This guy's just sitting there waiting for you. Like, you could, and there's zero process of naming somebody an interim head coach in the NFL, by the way. If a team wants to name Bill their interim head coach after 6 games, they can do it after 1 practice. Maybe it's 1 game. I need to find out the exact date at which you can name someone an interim head coach. Maybe it's after 1 game. But, like, that's when the window opens. And so I just would imagine that any team that actually thinks it's going to be good this year, that starts slow, the head coach is going to be feeling the pressure, realizing that the best ever is sitting, I was going to say standing on the sidelines. That would be the wrong way to put it, but it's sitting out for the season, or at least part of the season. But don't you think, and I haven't asked him this, I don't know this personally, but I would just imagine that when you're this close to the all-time wins record, and I think it's 15 wins away from tying Don Shula, like, you don't think Belichick wants that? I know the guy cares less about individual accolades than probably anybody, but he probably cares about the history of football more than anybody else on planet Earth right now. You have to imagine he's fueled by the possibility of being the all-time wins leader.
I said the other day on the podcast, obviously the NFC East is going to be circled. I do think the Eagles, like, they want the Sirianni thing to work. How he hired him, a little bit from obscurity. They're paying, between Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, $4 or $5 million each. If they are successful, even if they got bounced in like the second round, if they won a playoff game, won the division, I think that they would try to figure that out. I think the Cowboys, I mean, they have a coach under his final year of his contract. And the Giants, who are a major wild card in this draft, if they suck again next year, John Mara did fire back-to-back coaches after 2 years. This would be Dable's third year, and the last 2 years would be really ugly. And obviously, Belichick's, I don't want to say love affair, but he is he treats the Giants and the Jets like polar opposites, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So I think that would be pretty intriguing. So to me, the Giants and the Cowboys more than the Eagles. Now, if the Eagles are terrible, then they're in play. But they have so much talent, and now they got
it'd be hard for them to suck. Yeah.
I think they're going to be okay. I think the Cowboys thing lost some players. This Dak situation. Now McCarthy's proven to be a good regular season coach. You got to give him that. It's just the playoffs. And then the Giants, like I don't know where you stand. I agree with Schrager because I know how tied in he is in certain organizations. Clearly, they probably like JJ McCarthy a little bit, but I don't think that helps them this year at all, bro. I mean,
no.
If they draft JJ McCarthy, it's like you're no better on offense.
They're as
do you think that's going to happen? Because I know you went on his podcast. I'm just kind of assuming he kind of knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I will certainly defer to Peter because of how tied in he is. So I think it's possible. My big thing with the Giants and JJ McCarthy is if he falls to pick 6, I'm cool with it. If they have to trade up from 6 to 4 and give away their 2025 first, that to me is such a scary proposition.
That's insane to go from 6 to 4.
It's insane because that might be 6 this year and 7 next year to go up to 4. Right? That's just a crazy thing to do. But if you look at relevant trade up comps in the semi-recent past, there aren't a ton of them. But remember, San Francisco and Chicago flipped 2 and 3 during 2018 draft, the Trubisky 2017 draft, the Trubisky year, the Mahomes year. And San Francisco got a bunch of extra picks. And by the way, San Francisco took Eric Armstead, right? They weren't even taking a quarterback, and they were able to get Chicago to move up 1 pick. So it might cost the Giants a freight, and that's the part that makes me nervous. Is I like JJ a lot. He's got a lot of really, really, really solid traits. I just don't know that I can afford to double pay. Right, the 6th or 4th pick alone is an expensive investment, but to do that on top of potentially moving up to 4 and trading away multiple picks to get there, that to me is a little bit scary.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Caleb's going to a pretty incredible situation for a number 1 overall pick. If we assume the betting markets and the way everyone's talking, Jayden goes 2.
Yep.
The Patriots is not a great situation. It just is.
No.
Roster-wise, new coach, the negativity, it could get ugly fast. That 4th pick's a major wild card. Like if you are JJ McCarthy, who knows? The Patriots could take him too. Whoever the guy for,
I'd be surprised on that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say JJ's going to go 4. You should pray like Minnesota comes get you, right?
No doubt.
Even the Raiders who got Devontae and some other, just something else. The Giants thing, that could be a tough situation, man.
Well, let me tell you what. I have thought about this, and I haven't actually done it, but I've thought about it. I've pondered this. Like, should I just make JJ the 2nd or 3rd quarterback on the board for this reason? If JJ goes to Minnesota, there's a pretty decent shot he has the best or 2nd best season as a rookie of any of the quarterbacks in the class, right?
He might even redshirt,
wide receivers
so he might get the Mahomes treatment, right? If Darnold's fine.
Yeah. So, but if he did play, throwing to Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson when he's healthy, 2 really good tackles, Aaron Jones, Brian Flores on defense, scheming that group up, and did a heck of a job last year. Like Minnesota could push for like 10 wins with JJ as a rookie, and we'd be talking about him. Now, as we know, it's always about the long haul, right? Like Mac Jones, 2021 draft comes out, and by the end of the season, people are saying, should he have been the number 1 pick over Trevor Lawrence? Now he's backing up Trevor Lawrence. It's all hyperbole because of the fact that we live in a 24/7, 365 news and reaction cycle. But ultimately, it's why your evaluations of the player going into the draft last only until the draft begins. Because the minute they wind up in a situation, whatever that situation is, the evaluation of that player is different. So, I think Jayden Daniels would have a better chance of a lot of rookie success with the Commanders and the Patriots. And same thing with Drake Maye, right? The Commanders are not a fully formed offense right now, but they've got 6 picks in the top 100. They got Terry McLaurin. They got Jahan Dotson, right? I think they found something in Brian Robinson last year as a running back, 2 years ago. Pretty solid player, right? Like they've got enough there. Spend some money on a pair of interior offensive linemen, Nick Allegretti and Tyler Biadasz from free agency. Like that team could be decent this year on offense.
Draft a
Whereas at the
tackle in the second
Patriots,
round.
yeah. And like the Patriots, they got so many holes, right? Like on offense, like probably their best player right now is I think either Micah Onwenu, the right tackle, or Ramondre Stevenson, the running back. And in this league, like it's just not a great sign if your best offensive player is potentially your running back, who I think is a good player, but not like I don't think he's a top 10 back in the NFL. Point I'm saying is the Patriots got some work ahead of them. I think they acknowledge that. So if I'm the Patriots, concurrent with drafting a quarterback at 3 is, and I know that this goes against sort of everything I think Robert Kraft wants to say publicly, is I'd message like, we're in this for the long haul. It's going to take some time here, right? Like we need to find some wide receivers. We got to find some better offensive linemen. We just need some speed on this offense. And you can't knock out all of those priorities in one off season, especially when you don't have a quarterback in place during free agency. So wide receivers that are pondering, like, should I go to New England, are saying to themselves, maybe, but like, who am I catching passes from again? So it's a fascinating dynamic when you're trying to debate the ratings of these quarterbacks going into the draft, acknowledging that by Friday morning, my opinion of them could alter a little bit.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. The first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back, and you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit, because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row of seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Yeah, I mean, clearly Gerard, pretty high-level guy. You've never heard a negative thing about him as a player, as a leader. Even as an assistant coach, he's been really good. Being the head man's a different animal. And, like,
Totally.
let's use Alabama as an example. Kalen DeBoer, that is not easy shoes to fill. And he doesn't have any SEC equity, but it's like, hey, guys, I went 110-10. I just got the Washington Huskies in the national championship. I kind of know what I'm doing. So people are like, okay, let's just give this guy. Mayo can't be like, hey, I coached the Raiders for the last 4 years, made the playoffs a couple times. I know what I'm doing. Or I coached my alma mater for the last 4. He has zero equity as the head coach. So that thing you can see it coming from a mile away.
Totally.
If it goes bad. If I'm a quarterback, which it feels like it's going to be Drake Maye, listen, he's obviously a project. I would just bet against that because I think the first couple of years, Alex Smith, who wasn't as talented as Drake Maye, probably physically, those first 4 or 5 years were one of the ugliest things ever. And it took Jim Harbaugh and Andy Reid changing his life. But I mean, that's a long way to go for a rookie quarterback. So better keep his fingers
No
crossed.
doubt. No doubt, but they need to message that, and I know that's hard to do, right? Because no owner wants to come out and say like, could be 5-12 this year, guys,
For sure.
right? But I think that's important. Like, quarterbacks rarely ever wait anymore, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes is such an outlier, and the fact that he sat out all but one game. Teams, it's hard to resist. I mean, even the Bears a few years
Niners
ago
tried it with Trey Lance, but Jimmy got hurt and he played a couple games.
Yeah, and it sounds like Trey probably is one of those, and we'll see. He can still rewrite the narrative, but Trey might have just been like he was a swing for the fences, right? But the bottom line is those guys are so much the outlier as opposed to the standard in terms of when you expect a guy to actually play. So for the Patriots and Drake Maye, if it is Drake, and if I had to sort of cast my bet as of the time of this conversation, my feeling would be that it's Drake Maye has a decent chance of being the third pick. But you need to also be prepared for him sitting out for a while, because if you put him in that, you and I know this, we talk about quarterbacks busting. Sometimes teams fail the quarterback too, right? Like not putting the right pieces around him, too much organizational instability, like that stuff all is real. And I think Drake is the kind of guy that like might need some time. If he goes to New England, there's no denying he could end up being an absolute stud. Like the kid's got so much talent, it's ridiculous. Like I think the narrative around him actually become a little bit unfair. He just might need some more seasoning as opposed to somebody like Jayden Daniels, who, by the way, he's got 3 more years of starting experience on him. Drake started 2 full seasons in college. He was a redshirt freshman, or he took a redshirt year. Jayden Daniels walked onto Arizona State's campus as a 17-year-old, was under center, thrown to Ayuk right away, and played 5 straight years. Like he just got a lot more experience underneath him. Like he's got a lot more high-level reps than Drake Maye does.
Okay, last quarterback here. Not Brandon Ayuk, Michael Penix, who might as well have been thrown to Brandon Ayuk in Washington. Very polarizing guy. In a vacuum, you didn't have to factor in the variables. He's clearly one of the best players, but you can't quite do that, right? The age, the injuries. The age doesn't bother me as much as the injuries. And the other thing that I can't get out of my head, partly because I had a little money on it, him against Michigan, which Michigan was an NFL team. And he didn't get touched all season long. I think 11 sacks going into that game. He was, and he doesn't get touched. I mean, he's a top 10 NFL quarterback, not touched, and that's how well he throws it. That's not really the NFL, though. Like, you do get touched, and you do get moved off your spot. And it got derailed fast. I like him. I'm rooting for him. But I can't act like that doesn't give me a lot of concern. That I know it was only one game. It was a pretty big game. Opposite C.J. Stroud. It was only one game, but you saw in Georgia, you're like, Jesus, did you see that?
Yeah.
And that's kind of carried over. So getting hit. Same thing with Oregon. When Penix, and Oregon's also very talented NFL-like team, would hit him a lot, and you felt by the end of the game, you're like, God, and I respect his toughness. Is this guy going to be able to get up? That concerns me.
Sometimes in scouting, it's seeing what you choose to see. So, like, the Michael Penix believers will point to the game just before Michigan against Texas, where he was lights out. I mean, the guy was avoiding pressure in the pocket. Yeah, unbelievable, right? So you put that tape on in the scouting meeting, you can imagine what the reactions would be. The age does not bother me as well. The medical, I can't say bothers me or doesn't bother me because I don't have a doctor who I'm consulting with who would sign off on it or would say, hey, that's a medical red flag for us. So I don't know that I can speak with complete certainty on it. I would say that some teams have expressed less concern than others to me about Michael Penix Jr.'s knee. So, but the skill set, he's probably been, and I've said this a couple times on ESPN, the hardest player for me to pinpoint exactly where I should be mocking, right? Because you talk to people in the league that will tell you, hey, I know you have him at 34 on the overall big board, but I think he's not getting out of the first 13 picks. We know that run of 11, 12, 13 as of right now is Minnesota, Denver, Vegas. There are other people I talk to who are like, he will go in the second round. There's no two ways about it. So he's generated more split projections on mock drafts than maybe any prospect that I've studied this year. And the good is not just good, it's freaking outstanding. But every player's got those strengths and limitations, and the age, the mobility, I know he tested well at the pro day, but he's not as athletic as Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye or Caleb Williams. That much is for sure. Some of those things that Michael Penix Jr. does not do compared to those guys does make him a really difficult projection.
What's your hottest draft take?
Hottest draft take. Now, I'm a believer. I'm a Chop Robinson believer. He's a divisive prospect. Kid had an unbelievable combine in terms of like the 40 specifics. Got a great first step. The flashes are awesome. He had 11 and a half career sacks, though. Maryland for a year, 2 years at Penn State, had 4 sacks this past season. 2 of them came against UMass. So there are some that are saying, like, yeah, he's got all the tools, but why didn't he put it together more often? I'm a believer in Chop Robinson, and I think there's a chance he ends up being the second edge rusher taken next Thursday night, which would, I think, probably run counter to how a lot of people are currently forecasting it. But if you can find a team that wants to put the emphasis on the athletic ability, the first step quickness, the bend, the torque, and some of the competitiveness in the running game, like, it wouldn't surprise me if there are teams that are saying, yeah, top 16 player in the draft.
Yeah, I know you got to get out of here, but I want to hear your take on this. Joe Alt, I did a little thing like a couple days ago.
Yep.
6'8", 6'9" tackles, and I get this guy's a better athlete than McGlinchey.
Yep.
They do give me some concern because it is difficult. And I know people say he's closer to Colton Miller, but it's like, I don't know. I mean, he didn't test as well, though. He's playing football, not testing combine. So
Sure.
I get it. But what's your take on 6'9" guys? He's not Michael Jordan as an athlete, but he's a good athlete playing against a league full of guys 6'2", 6'3" that can all bend. It's hard to get that low, and it's given a lot of guys trouble.
Yeah, and he can really bend. Like, he's a pretty darn fluid athlete. Like, he's got incredible bloodline, son of an NFL offensive lineman. His father John in the Chiefs Hall of Fame. His brother's a hockey player. Was drafted in the second round.
Decent genetics.
Yeah, they got some pretty good genes over there at the Alt family. I do have him as top ranked tackle. My gap's a little bit narrower between him and the next couple guys, and I think some in the same role at different places have Joe Alt. I don't think it's quite as clear cut above everybody else. I think he's number one, but I think you can make a compelling case for Olu Fashanu from Penn State, Troy Fautanu from Washington, if you believe he's a left tackle. It's a good tackle class. It's why I will continue to point, and maybe Tennessee will just do the very obvious thing and take Joe Alt 7. But I continue to wonder if Tennessee, who already traded multiple picks last year to move up to get Will Levis, and next year's 2025 third is already gone as well. That was part of the L'Jarius Sneed trade, which, by the way, those are justifiable investments, but they're a little short on draft capital relative to other teams picking in the top 7. I do wonder if Tennessee might be a potential trade back team, and they say, we can have Joe Alt at 7, or we could have Olu Fashanu at 11 or 12 or 13 or 15, or, Troy Fautanu at 15, and feel pretty good about the outcome all the same.
Yeah, I think the problem is the Cardinals, the Chargers, the Titans. I think there are a lot of teams that want to head.
Everybody wants to go backwards.
Head the wrong way. So it's going to be interesting because some of these teams are going to get stuck. Field Yates, ABC, no big deal. See you soon, buddy.
I appreciate you having me on, man.
No problem.